name, or I guess I'll.
Yeah,
My friend's first
cold
name.
opening.
Yeah, my friend's first name is the letter C.
Nice.
It's actually the letter C, and his
Yeah.
name is C. Jeremy, and so it's very similar to F. Ichiro. Like you could
Yeah.
just say like your first name's the letter F.
Yeah. F's and chat boys.
F. Ichiro Gifford writes and thinks a lot about energy, energy policy, and the way regulation shapes what we can and can't build. Today, we want to have a loose conversation about energy regulation, New England, and some of the strange historical paths that got us here. This is partly an interview with Ichiro and partly a group conversation. We'll probably wander a little, or a lot, but the center of gravity is why is it so hard to build important things? Our mutual friend Bill Spillane is building StarCube, and he was just enthralled with all of your writings, and then invited you to come out for the nuclear meetup that it was like a 3-day event that happened in Portsmouth recently, and yeah, and you came out to that, and I guess maybe you could tell us a little bit like why you started writing that blog to begin with.
hmm Yeah, so when I started writing that blog, I was already working in public power in particular in New England. So I was already kind of back of house for a lot of stuff, talking with customers, figuring out all this decarbonization stuff, trying to make it actually happen, trying to do power supply, seeing kind of how electric service actually works. And there are problems, many of them. Um, I am not furious in the slightest. And so to try and kind of get those frustration out, I started writing about this because I learned very quickly um, that the people comment about energy, there are actually very few of them that aren't either like willful ideologues, like the stank of ideology, or just fucking stupid, or both.
Interesting. So, kind of unpacking that a bit, the people who are dictating policy aren't actually people who understand energy, and it's people who have their own agendas and whatnot, and energy is one way to regulate to like push their agenda, and so they're like, could this not just be like, is this true for every other part of government then?
I mean, technically, yeah. But the thing with specifically electric service is that it's a very hard thing to know the full picture of. Because if you want to get into the actual engineering, that's an entire technical stack. You become an engineer. Or you want to get into the power supply side, you become a finance person or an economist. Understand the technical stack, you become an electrical engineer, and you get all very far in that. To understand the back end of power supply, you become an economist to a certain extent. To understand the front of house, you're doing customer service. There's an IT component. There's a lawyer component. Like, there's an entire stack of utility law that's just separate from any other kind of law. It has its own corpus that is state by state and a mess. And
Hmm.
then you get onto the actual building of the stuff, and it's these like blue collar. The last Ford Raptor men in New England are all linemen. And so just the technical stack, like understanding even a little piece of it, it's like 15 blind men touching an elephant. Like you don't see the whole picture. Um,
Hmm.
and because of that, it is so easy to just say dumb shit. Um, and that goes across the political spectrum. Some of the people that annoy me the most are like fossil fuel shills to a certain extent. A lot of these people are they drink haterade at industrial levels. And to a certain extent, like you can't uninvent the solar panel, you can't uninvent the electric car. And a lot of people wish you could. And so there wasn't anyone who was trying to like hold the whole technical side in one head, trying to like keep an open mind about what can and can't work. And so that became me. And so it turned out that by blogging about it for like 8 months, I became like unfortunately, a foremost expert on energy policy in New England and potentially in the country. Uh, it's a low bar. Um, but yeah, so that's where I kind of came from.
When I sat there and I was chatting with you in the bar, you spoke with so much conviction. Um, can you talk a little bit about just briefly like what it's like to go from being an analyst to like just blogging like free as an independent person out there in the universe? Like,
Yeah.
what's that been like?
Um, it's been freeing. I mean, I guess the thing is that even if I sound like I have a lot of conviction, the biggest opinion I have is that we aren't really thinking about the trade-offs in enough detail. Um, and there's not a lot of pragmatism, and there's a lot of very rigid thinking. So, for example, I've been saying electric service this entire time. I'm not saying fix the grid, because the grid has an entire stack of assumptions that, to a large extent, haven't really changed since, like, Westinghouse and Tesla and Sam Insel. Like, it's the same technical stack. It's the same structure of alternating current transmission, generators, load, you sell by the kilowatt hours to houses and you sell by the kilowatt to industrial loads. And like it's a century old system and we're still kind of running with it.
And just to clarify, when you say grid versus service, you're saying, I'm going to guess here, like grid being like what we typically think of, like linemen, energy generation.
Exactly.
But electric service, you're saying, look, I don't care like how it gets to my house, don't care. Like you're saying, like
Exactly.
Service. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
And trying to think about it first principles based, which is very hard. It's a thing I've only just now started to do for myself. And there's so much new technology, and there are a lot of people whose business models depend on you taking their view of what's wrong with energy and not asking too many questions.
So ideologically driven.
Yeah, ideologues in like every direction. Like it's not just the climate people. It'd be too easy if it was just the climate people.
I mean, I can even feel it as you were describing, like the beginning. I always have this temptation to go on this long screed of why you're not allowed to do anything anymore, and that itself can be ideological too.
Yeah. I imagine the oil and gas lobby is just as big of an influence as it may be the largest influence. Is that right? Like
Less than you think, actually.
huh?
The oil and gas guys have had a very bad decade.
Interesting. Well, I guess
The price of oil is so low that they're not making margin. They only started really making margin once the Strait of Hormuz situation got up and running. Because with the price of, I think about West Texas Intermediate, which is the crude oil that comes out of Texas. That's the point of reference. That number has been like $80, $70, $60 for the past year. And it's not been that much higher before that. That is barely break-even money. Like you're not making.
What is like the threshold of break even? Like 55 or something? Or
55, $60, something like that. Like it's per barrel of oil. And so if you're a shale producer in the past like 10 years, you haven't really been making money. Ditto for natural gas production that's not New England. New England's weird, and we'll get to it. But there's one hub in West Texas, the Waha hub, that routinely has negative prices on natural gas. Because if you're in a shale well, you're getting what's called associated gas. You're drilling for oil, but with the oil you get natural gas, and you get so much natural gas, it's literally a waste product functionally. That in some cases it's too expensive to bottle and put into a pipe. You just burn it at the top. And there are this is a technology that I believe Crusoe, the crypto miner turned AI firm, really pioneered. It's called digital flare mitigation, which is you take natural gas that would have just been flared off like that, wasted energy, and use it to mine crypto. Digital flare mitigation. All of a sudden, it has relevant productive power. And that's just how much natural gas we have. The price at the Henry Hub is like basically the cost to transport it, and that's it. Um,
I see.
Crazy.
yeah.
To think,
So if you're not in New England,
just
the
I
price
don't
of
think
natural
people-
gas.
yeah.
The price of natural gas is so cheap that the price of natural gas liquids like ethane is so cheap that ethylene is so cheap that it is literally not worth the money functionally to recycle plastic. It is
then
cheap.
what's
It is cheaper to get new plastic than to recycle the old plastic.
Then what's the bottleneck here? Like, okay, we have all this natural gas. Like,
Mm-hmm.
we're literally burning it off, and we're mining. We're like turning that into compute for crypto, right?
Yes. Let's
Where
talk
what's
about.
what like? I mean, maybe there's not one, but like, what do you think are like the one or two or three biggest bottlenecks here? Like, why can't we do something with with those resources?
Yes, we are looking at actually a few bottlenecks. Let me see if I can pull up the. Is the map gone? The map is gone. There are a limited number of natural gas pipelines that go through New York into New England. There's, I believe, the Tennessee gas pipeline. I think it's called the Algonquin pipeline. They're mostly connected to the These pipelines are mostly connected to the Pennsylvania Marcellus shale fields, which is similar vibes to Texas, but smaller because it's not Texas. And, back in the early aughts, that was enough natural gas. What happened in the aughts is two things. First is we started replacing coal with natural gas. Because natural gas is lower carbon emissions, lower SOx and NOx, more efficient. You can run it in a combined cycle gas turbine format instead of just a steam turbine. So a lot of coal got replaced with natural gas. And then also, on the house side, New England is strange that we're the only part of the United States that uses oil heating at scale. It's not a thing outside of New England.
What is that like a function of New England developing first and like developing their infrastructure first before like the rest of the country did? Were we using
Yes.
like, whale oil or something? And they're like, we had to like we have like pipes for whale oil.
Well, my
It wasn't
my
for
aunt's-
whale oil? Yeah, but go ahead.
my aunt is like, I think she's like, sorry, I'm gonna reveal your age, Aunt Nancy. She's like 70-ish. She's in her 70s. When she grew up, they were still using coal to heat their home in Boston or like south of Boston. I don't know if it could be partly because we used coal down in the
Yeah,
cellar.
they went
or-
from
I don't know.
charcoal to number 6 bunker oil for a lot of these houses. And a lot of those, if I remember correctly, like were installed in the 50s and 60s. But it stuck around. But a lot of new heating, like we saw a lot of replacements of oil heat with gas heat, thank Mass Save, in like the aughts. So between conversion of gas for homes and conversion of gas for electricity, gas consumption in New England rose dramatically. And for what it's worth, if you're a green, a capital G green, the proliferation of natural gas has been the single greatest win for decarbonization in the 21st century. Not because it is zero carbon, but because it is cheaper, dramatically, than higher carbon solutions. It is lower SOx, lower NOx, lower CO2, higher efficiency than any kind of oil generation, than any kind of coal generation. And similar for any kind of home heating. But all of that means that we now, during a winter storm, during a cold snap, like the one we had this past winter, New England, broadly Boston, needs about 6 billion cubic feet a day of natural gas. Gut number. Our natural gas pipeline infrastructure can handle about 5. oops. And so in practice, what happens is that the heating customers get the gas first. Firm contracts. The idea being that it would be bad if people froze to death. So instead, we still believe that people freezing is bad. That might not be the case always. And so the electric generation gas consumers are on non-firm contracts, meaning that during these kind of cold snaps, they get cut off from natural gas, and the marginal fuel generation for New England becomes oil. A whole bunch of dual fuel oil gas turbines, a whole bunch of reciprocating engine oil generations all over the place. A lot of number 2 diesel for that. Some out of number 6 bunker oil, I think. That's a not fun fuel to use. But that is why New England specifically has some of the highest carbon electricity during the winters. Because we don't have the gas.
The highest what electricity?
Highest carbon emission.
Carbon emission, okay.
And highest cost, yes, but highest carbon emission.
So, okay, I'm curious to unpack a few of these things. So, one, I do think stopping people from freezing has to be towards the top of the priority rank. I don't know what else. I'm not sure what else is up there, but it sounds pretty important. But okay, so we have this grid or this infrastructure that can pull in 5 billion gallons of oil, and we need 6. Or sorry, natural gas. I'm getting the words wrong here, but like we have this infrastructure that can do 5, and we need to do 6. Are we just not building? Is any effort to like build more of that infrastructure just being stopped by legislators or activists or whatnot?
Yeah, so there are a couple of projects that come to mind in this context, particularly on the electric side. The first is offshore wind off Long Island Sound. Cape Wind, Vineyard Wind, I forget the names. But these wind projects have been in the works for 10, 15 years. And these have consistently gotten shot down, in part because of messy implementation. These wind turbines have not necessarily been reliable. They frequently go over budget. And there's also a significant amount of local resistance. My personal nemesis, we all need an enemy. Mine is a cohort of activists called the ACRATs, named after the ACK Nantucket Airport. These are the people who fight most vociferously against wind generation in New England, because they believe that the low frequency vibrations of a wind turbine kill whales. Now, these guys, these are Nantucketers. These are full-time Nantucketers. These are Range Rover motherfuckers. I hate them. And so that's the offshore wind side.
Interesting, because offshore wind in theory is like green and yada yada. It's like it's almost like I don't know what to call it other than like post woke. It's like almost just like horseshoe theory thing. Like it's actually so green that it's not green. And this is actually bad for us. Like like we just want no electricity. And
we'll get to degrowth. And there's another project. There's another project that comes to mind. That's a transmission line called the New England Clean Energy Connect. The idea was to connect to fill in our electricity shortages with power from Hydro-Quebec, because Quebec has a whole stack of hydroelectric turbines. For now, an excess of power. There's been a drought. It's less of an excess now. But the idea was we already have one coming through New Hampshire, one coming through Vermont, and then we wanted to get one more. We wanted to run through Vermont. They said no. We wanted to run it through New York. They said no. So instead, we ran it through Maine, and that was so politically controversial that the fracas turned into a referendum to convert Versant and Central Maine Power, investor-owned utilities, into municipalized type systems, which is to me a bit decolonization in vibe, of like, let's just seize this private property in the name of some kind of state ownership. And so it didn't go anywhere, but like that's the level of controversy that even building a transmission line, because oh my god, you're killing trees. The core challenge is that heavy industry in any kind is icky. You know, it's not swag, it's not woke. You have to think about the carbon emissions of like steel and plastic. And it's so much easier to just like work for a B Corp and like make zero carbon tote bags than it is to like actually weigh out the environmental consequence of doing A versus B.
Mm-hmm.
And it's icky. And when you say this thing is going to cost a couple $1 billion, people already think you're swindling them of money. They don't want to spend that extra money, even if it reduces their bills in the long term. No one wants new energy. They want the prices to go down. They want someone else off screen to pay for it, and they want someone else off screen to have the thing be next to them.
Mm-hmm. It's like NIMBYism, but at the state level or something.
It's NIMBYism at the regional level.
Yeah,
it is
yeah.
everywhere. And that's just where we are.
So which states do you think are doing well? Okay, so like New England as a whole, people aren't like collaborating and helping solve each other's problems. Like where do you think it's being done well? Is there anywhere in the US or in the world that is
Texas is
an
building a
example?
lot. And to a certain extent, that's just because when you're out in the boonies, there's fewer stakeholders, and also very often the people owning the land get a stake of whatever the development is. And well, China does a great job of building stuff. I don't necessarily think we should emulate them, because the reason they can build so quickly is that if you resist, you get shot.
Yeah. But maybe maybe authoritarianism is the only way to get new energy built. I don't know.
I
Like
sure fucking hope not.
I mean, it kind of like, it seems to me like it begs the question. Well, one question is there any time in history where people like I know that in order for me to buy all these like things that I'm benefiting from the division of labor, that a lot of this stuff came over the sea in a ship, or it was in a factory, and they were using the energy like that's moving the river, and then later they were burning oil to turn a shaft. Like I appreciate it because I'm like, yeah, this shirt was like $50 instead of however many hours it would take me to make this, and then whatever my hourly rate is. So I appreciate it, but clearly the common person is completely disconnected. Is there a time in history where people, like whatever the equivalent of heavy industry was in their time, is there a time in history where people were like, yeah, that's fucking awesome?
It would be the last time that really happened that I think about a lot is people who are now in their 50s in China. People who were kids or, young when Deng Xiaoping got in, and they just saw like Shenzhen just get built up. And so they remember what life was like before. I don't take it for granted. We have been rich for a very long time. We've gotten very
Yeah,
used
it's,
to it.
it's it's interesting. This is sort of a tangent, but my parents are immigrants, and so growing up, I spent a lot of time in India, kind of outside the country in general, and having that perspective makes me really appreciate what America is, and that in some ways that's sort of the dynamic you're talking about, where you like if you grew up in China in the 50s and 60s, and you feel like what it is now, like I've also experienced like both, like people who've never left America have no idea what the alternative is.
Yeah, but if you grew up in like the rough
No air
part of
conditioning.
Lahore, like working at McDonald's is a considerable improvement.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, this is again yet another tangent, but like I Americans have the luxury of complaining about America. Like, it's not a perfect place. It's not a perfect place. Like, I buy that there's problems and all this stuff, but like, it's still the best place to live and be. So, um, yeah, I think we just haven't had. So, yeah, maybe the root of it is like we don't know what it was like in the hard times here, and it's just been easy times for the past 40 years.
Yeah, and I think that's part of it, and I think it's also there's the the institutions that maintained all of this stuff. I think we can go if we want to segue a little bit. We can go to my historical angle, because I have a historical view that ties into like one of the books that has really shaped my worldview over the past 5 years. It's a guy named George Friedman, founder of a company called Stratfor, and he wrote a book in 2020-ish, before COVID, I think, called "The Storm Before the Calm." And one of the theses of the book was that the United States operates off these institutional cycles. There's a big crisis. We build an entire institutional governmental apparatus of like who is in power and what the structure of that power looks like. It, survives about 80 years, at which point the people who remember when it was built are all dead. And then another crisis comes in and the entire thing has to get, torn down and rebuilt back up. Because we are Americans. We refuse to have a sense of history, which is a good thing. And so we have a habit of burning down our entire political system or burning down or whatever and rebuilding it from scratch. I think this is on net a good thing. So the first of the institutional cycles started with the Revolutionary War and like the idea of these United States. The self-evident truths in the Declaration were not self-evident. In many parts of the world, they remain not self-evident. And at the time, like that was, the French Revolution still kind of was a little bit after the Declaration of Independence. Like building a modern republic. Like this is the first of its kind, really, since Rome. And so it took a little while to figure out. And that, was a matter of Jefferson and Publius and that whole fight. And it came together into this very interesting, it really was by modern context, a very federalist system. And that worked reasonably well up until about the Civil War and the idea of a union. Because the Civil War was among the first really industrialized wars. It was like that and the Crimean War out in Europe. The first real shows of industrial integration. And that was the first time we had a national elite instead of a state-by-state elite. There's a writer and analyst named Tanner Greer, who wrote a recent piece about the Eastern Establishment that should become a book. It should, Tanner. About this first national elite, the Vanderbilts, the Morgans, the Carnegies, like these guys. And that was the first national elite. That was the first time we talked about the United States instead of these United States. And that worked out for the Civil War up until the Second World War and the Great Depression. And that's where we get the large government we know, and the Kali Yuga, as Ryan would frame it.
Wait, so what? Okay, so we went from states that were largely disparate to a small federal government.
To a small federal government
After the Civil War. Okay, and then
with
World War II gets us to the large government.
And the large government, it's not just a large government, it was a government run by experts, technocrats. The song that I think about a lot that explains it the best is Laurie Anderson's bop and three quarters called "Only an Expert," which might be a great tape
That's
to
a
run.
deep cut. That is an extremely deep cut.
It is also the best explanation of technocracy as a pitch. The initial line being, only an expert can deal with a problem because half the problem is seeing the problem. And that rise of technocracy, the first technocracy was hastily put together to marshal an industrial machine towards winning the war. Two wars, actually. That's how good they were. They managed to beat a two-front war on both cases by just outbuilding the other side by like
Hell yeah.
massive
That's
volume.
why we're back-to-back World War champions.
Yeah, the same war, won twice. Like
Hell
this
yeah.
is this was the only. No, Japan was also fighting a two-front war, but the other side had sticks. But that was the technocracy was hastily built to win that, and then solidified to fight the Cold War. You know, with the Marshall Plan, with the gold standard, with Bretton Woods as a structure. And
You mean going off of the gold standard?
first getting
Right.
on, and then eventually kicking it off to go, overdrive on printing money. But like the Bretton Woods geopolitical structure started as that, and that was the rise of the expert. That was the rise of, frankly, guys like me, professional knowers of things, sitting in an office and like basically remolding the world with spreadsheets. And the nice thing about technocrats is that if they're the ones handling this complicated ass thing, you don't have to be the one to do it. You don't want to think about, for example, electric service. You don't want to think about how the power gets to you. That's a lot. It's kind of complicated and it's deeply scary. What people prefer to do, having talked to them on the phone, is they want to pay their bill. They want it to be not too much. They want to turn on their lights and just have it work. And they don't want to talk to me. Because if they're talking to me, if they're thinking about the physical infrastructure that is electric service, there's already a failure. The fact that the president has said the word PJM interconnection is a dire failure of the electric grid in that area. These people should be invisible. I should be invisible. You shouldn't have to know a damn thing about what I do. It should just work. But trusting that an institution like electric service, like monetary policy, like, your home loan, that requires experts like me to be trustworthy. But we have, let's go just since the 90s, deindustrialization, Iraq, the Great Recession, inequality driven by zero interest loans, real worry about immigration, the excesses of Woke 1.0, which I was there for, I was around for, I saw it in person, COVID, AI. There is ample evidence for normal people to conclude that experts like me are out to get them. And they're not wrong. And so we're at the tail end of another institutional cycle. The people that remember why we hired a whole cadre of technocrats to, build this are all dead. The people who grew up and inherited the technocratic system, the baby boomers, are all retiring. And now we have people who have only seen like the rebellion to the thing that was already built.
So there's a lot of distrust and cynicism now that is the next iteration of this.
Exactly.
Is that a fair way to summarize?
We're now.
There's also, like, to be fair too, there is a lot of inflation of value of these credentials that these experts have accumulated over the last. It's like so blatantly obvious at this point.
It is very obvious that a lot of experts, people like me, are fucking dumb. Because way back when, the idea of merit was very specific. You were an expert in the thing you did. But, the people who remembered why we had those metrics, what they were for, are all dead. The people who grew up even with the idea of the like solemn civil servant are all dead. Or like, the point of reference is that the person who really remembers the beginning, middle, and end of the Cold War is Joe Biden. He remembers. He used to remember. I don't know how much he remembers still, but he was there for the beginning, middle, and end of the Cold War. He would have remembered why we did this in the first place. And that's
Yeah.
the category of person we have. They're all gone now.
Yeah, I think the distrust is not a left or right thing. I think it's just a politician.
It's a
I
correct.
think just generally people distrust people in power because both sides have done things that they've warped data, they've hid numbers, all these things. It's all in service of them staying in power. It's not actually for helping people. And so yeah,
And
where do you think this goes then?
yeah.
What's going to happen? How do we fix this?
Yes. So my personal belief is that the counter to corrupt, ineffective elites that have mistaken the map for the territory is better elites. But I am trying to become one of those guys, so that's me talking my book. You know.
Interesting. I live in New Hampshire, and I my thesis on the counter to that is no elites.
So that's a
And
counterexample. Yep.
yeah, it's funny. So how so what does better elites mean to you, and how how can we manifest that
Yes.
in your worldview?
Yes. And this is the part where again I have to reiterate: I am talking my book. Uh, do not take me at face
Sure,
value.
you're a true politician. That's exactly what. Yeah, I love
Huh.
it. Yeah, you're
Um,
a politician.
and so I think at least part of the value is in going back to those first principles and asking, what is the point of having professional knowers of things, managing the back end of all of this? What do they need to be doing? And for me, that is at least starting with refactoring the markers of credibility. I remember I was like talking to some guy who was like, "Oh my god, you worked at XYZ company. You must be so smart. Tell me how to get there." And he was like, "Oh my god, you're a kid from Harvard. That must mean you're so smart." Wrong. And so I told him like, it's 2026. I don't give a damn that you went to Harvard. Frankly, that's more of a red flag to your competence than a good thing. You have to independently establish your reputation. We're still at that very nascent stage of refactoring what it means to be credible because we're on the tail end of Goodhart's Law. All of these metrics have become goals and they're now worthless, up to and including like leak code for coders. Like you can crush your leak code benchmarks and be a terrible software programmer, and now that's just like widely known.
So
Yeah,
you're
for
you're
sure.
kind of you're kind of talking about like I think Naval Ravikant talks about this sometimes, where to build credibility, make a bet, but put your name on it and make it public. And then over time, you have a history of bets that are public that have your name on it. And it doesn't mean bet like invest. It means bet like maybe it's time, maybe it's you built a thing or whatever. And then over time, you have a trail of credibility behind you. Like everybody said when Elon was doing the Tesla and SpaceX initially, like 23 years ago or whatever, they were like, "Oh, look, software guy's trying to do a thing, ha ha ha," and then it's like 20 years later, no one's going to question he's an engineer, like he knows how to do this stuff. But
And more
maybe at the beginning,
importantly, it's with Elon in particular. He's a guy who not only has he accomplished, quite frankly, astonishing feats of not even engineering, but engineering management. He has built very good organizations of engineering. The way Tesla does engineering manufacturing is the real magic part. The way SpaceX has done engineering manufacturing and vertical integration, that's the magic of it. And that's the technology in particular. And not only is it done so well, Elon has done it so well that he has established a new source of credibility from his proximity. If you are a high level person at Tesla, that means more than it does to be someone who did really well at Harvard.
it
Or
sounds like Yeah, it sounds like the key issue here is being able to, like, re-educating people to be able to see what credibility actually is, which is not just like you're like Harvard is a consolidation of credibility because you're like, well, you went to Harvard and Harvard has done great things. Um,
And it
it
used to
doesn't
mean
need to
that
be.
that the Harvard degree meant something, and it doesn't mean as much anymore. It means a different set of things. It means you checked a lot of boxes and you're very good at checking boxes. But for example, at Tesla, for you to succeed at Tesla, it means a certain number of things that you can have some thoughts on.
I see.
And
Yeah. So
so scaling up that credibility requires basically refactoring all of the institutions that bestow credibility. And that requires you to have institutions that organically build their own credibility. And it's going to take 10 years. Um,
yep.
and so in the
Yeah.
meantime, we're all going to have to
We
figure
need
out who
to.
to trust. And like,
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
So summarizing, like you're saying that the world should be a meritocracy. The way we measured merit in the past is wrong. Is no, maybe it's like disintegrating. It's not that
Mm-hmm.
it's like wrong, but it's just not as strong a signal anymore. And so the future elites we should measure them by a new set of merits
Mm-hmm.
that are being reshaped in front of us. I guess one of those is, were you able to succeed in a really challenging work environment?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I it's funny. Like I'm 35 years old,
Mm-hmm.
and I think the barometer, the easy barometer that everyone kind of goes by, like the scoreboard in life or whatever, is like the amount of money you made.
Mm-hmm.
And I just like vehemently disagree with that. I'm not saying like money doesn't matter. Like, I think it's probably correlated, but it's not the only thing. So, yeah, I guess the what else would you bring into this equation then? If it's like,
Yeah.
oh, you've demonstrated excellence in a private company, what else would you throw in there?
Yeah. And this is where I actually want to wind the tape back on what I said. What I said functionally was I know that single-mindedly trying to quantify merit and assign prestige based on merit has gotten us into an immense mess. What we should do is that, but again and better. That is a very suspect thing to claim. Uh, so, again, take what I say with a grain of salt. I am, when I say, we want to reinvent merit, we want to reestablish trust, that is exactly the job I want to have. And, if we're going to really think about like what it means to be trustworthy, we have to also keep some of the examples in mind. For example, Zoran Mamdani. He has a great many policy proposals that I have some concerns about. But the reason he is so popular is that he very obviously cannot be bought. Right? Zoran Mamdani cannot be bought at all. And he will mock you if you try. And that is a marker of trust. But is that necessarily a marker of actually making things work? Different thing. Or if saying someone is smart as fuck. Elon is smart as fuck. But he's also crazy. And he causes almost as many problems as he solves. We can talk about SpaceX being incredible. We can talk about Tesla being incredible. But on the flip side, Doge was a trash fire that failed at all of its goals. XAI is a trash fire that is failing at all its goals. He is not batting 100. And so, when I talk about restoring trust, restoring markers of merit, there are deep problems with that claim. And
Yeah,
that's
especially if you redefine it and say, look, I've determined the perfect equation for merit, and look who's at the top.
yeah,
Ichiro.
just me, or even just like saying like Harvard sucks. You know what we should do? Harvard 2. Cool.
So
You
it
know, we're
sounds
replacing hard with Teal's Founders Fund. Cool.
so when
Yeah.
you're saying better elites, is there anything? Are we making any claims about the system? Are we making any claims about the establishment of a new system? Are you trying like? I'm dancing around a little bit. What I really
Yeah.
want to ask is like, why haven't we just said, you know what? Why don't we let the market actually find these solutions?
Mm. That requires actually instituting the market, and there are some challenges there. Uh, and so one thing, and I guess again, Elon's a very good point of reference here. The challenge of making quality American automobiles that Americans want to buy was just like categorically not being done at scale since like the 80s. The big three have just never gotten their act together on that. The first small American car, small in quotes, American car that Americans wanted to buy was the Tesla Model Y. It sells like hotcakes. Because it's just a good car. And that was a new market entrant. Um, the challenge with doing that for electric service is that if we're still thinking about the grid, we're still thinking about a extremely capex heavy category of technology that, because it's like an infrastructure system, trends towards monopolies without careful action. And the way that problem was solved initially was to let them be monopolies, but like shoot them through with regulators and lawyers. And that
As monopoly, like to me, it always feels like that monopoly can't really exist without the government sort of like some sort of there's some sort of blocking and tackling happening there. And I guess part of the reason why I feel that way is that when I read about the mills, which are famous for the reasons why we have unions now, like for worker safety and worker health and whatever. But when you look at what the people left to go work in the mills, they were like, well, yeah, I work on a farm and I don't know if I'm going to have food every year. The mill is here every year. And obviously, as you fast forward, you're like, okay, well, now standard of living expectations change. But I feel like the monopoly argument, for example, Texas, for example, is famous for being. I don't know a ton about Texas.
it's very market driven on the electric side.
Yeah, and some people did die. They had a winter and some people died.
Yeah.
And people in New England were like, "Oh, it's because you're whatever, you're too market driven." But then you look at the other hand of it is that Texas has more alternative energy solutions deployed than anywhere else in the country,
And
which is ironic because they're a red, they're usually what people think of as a very red state.
and to give Texas some credit, they learned their lesson. The prior, winter 2026, which was brutal and very nearly led to brownouts in the PJM territory in the Midwest, zero problems. Not even on the market side in Texas. They learned their lesson. It just worked. But even in Texas, the generation side, very market driven, very nice. But, one, unleashing that market system in New England, because we do have a market for power supply. It is there. It's designed slightly differently, but it's the same underlying structure. If you have a non-profit quasi-government thing managing this like planned economy market, it's the same structure as ERCOT with some different decisions on the market design, which it's a designed market, which is a strange thing to have. But the issue there is permitting. It's not the underlying market structure. And even when we go to the Texas side, you're still looking at regulated monopolies for the transmission and distribution. It's still a monopoly on that side of things. And you're still running into the same fundamental business model level issues with return on equity based regulation. It's still fundamentally the same core thing. Just because ERCOT is better at their jobs as New England in certain ways, that's a marginal difference functionally.
Yeah,
Yeah.
let's talk about New Hampshire. So okay, so I guess like maybe Ryan and I can share like our thesis and see we can pressure test that. Um, we just talked about how you think the answer to bad elites is better elites,
And that is a
and
very bad answer. I'm going to caveat that. That is not an
Yeah,
answer you should take.
I don't like that answer.
You should not
You're
you should
already
not take my
saying
opinions
the hard
about things that like directly employ me.
Well, when
part.
I was sitting with you at the bar, I was like, oh yeah, he's like a pure free marketist, cool. And then you, which I love the fact that we don't agree on this too,
Yeah.
by the way. But
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
I, I am a
just
think it's
washed up communist. Like, let's be very real here.
great. Yeah, I love talking to people who have different views than me. I think it's interesting to play out the thought experiments, and yeah, maybe you're right. But like, um, I, along with a lot of people, are pretty jaded in general about institutions and
Mm-hmm.
feel like there's been degradation on. And again, I don't think this is like one side of the political spectrum or whatever. I think it's just like universal across the board. And one thing that I really like about New Hampshire is that the whole premise is less government is better government, which I generally agree with. I don't necessarily think that people in power are like way smarter and way more capable than me at doing something. They're just like they're just narcissists who want to be in power. Uh, so do you see that as a formula for building more, like solving some of these problems you're talking about in terms of building electricity, you know, and then after you answer this, I have a follow-up question about SMRs and some of that stuff that's going on here.
I am open to fresh ideas. Um, Most things are an improvement over the status quo. So send it.
Great. Okay, so yeah, one of the things I like about having 50 states is that you can have competing policy. And you
Mm-hmm.
can sort of like play out the thesis, right? Like, hey, like New Hampshire can do it and like see what happens, and then you can see what happens in, you know, Kansas or California or whatever.
The
Um,
caveat is that we're getting
and
more and more federal over the years.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, there's still some sort of line in the sand, which I think is great. And okay, so putting my New Hampshire hat on even more, one thing we think about as a country is energy independence,
Mm-hmm.
right? How do we not rely on foreign governments for oil? Well, taking that to the next level, it's like, okay, what does energy independence for states look like?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, like playing that out to its like total end state, what does energy independence for the individual look like? Like energy
Mm-hmm.
sovereignty for me. And some of the interesting stuff in New Hampshire is around building small modular reactors, SMRs. And that's really interesting because it's the like unassailable holy grail of energy independence, which
Mm-hmm.
is I have my own reactor. Nobody else can, it just powers my like mini grid or whatever you want to call it and on my property. Like what do you think about those sorts of futures? Are those viable? And like is that a solution to our problems?
On a technical level, absolutely. A lot of these technologies are very cool. A lot of them are national labs prototypes that seem to work pretty well. In terms of the safety record of nuclear, it's actually fantastic. It is a it is a real testament to the safety of nuclear that we can name every single major nuclear accident on one hand. We have 3 Mile, we have Chernobyl, we have Fukushima, we have Hiroshima and Nagasaki. We'll throw them on there as well. Get it to a full 5. And so that's an
Did you
incredible.
mention Chernobyl? Is Chernobyl on there?
Chernobyl's on there. But yeah, Chernobyl, 3
Oh,
Mile, Fukushima, Hiroshima, and Nagasaki.
yep, yeah, sorry.
And so that's an incredible safety record. The reason that nuclear is no longer sexy is because the Sierra Club won't stop shutting up, and because heavy industry is icky. Um, I think if you painted the nuclear reactor pink, you'd go quite a long way.
Have you read Rad Future?
I have not. I'll read it. The real challenge with SMRs is not technical. It is one, supply chain. Where do you get the underlying fuel from? A lot of that comes from Russia. A lot of it comes from Kazakhstan. See, and the real issue, because the fuel you can probably fix by recycling spent nuclear fuel. It's there. The real issue is exclusively regulatory. At the federal level, it's NRC and licensing through that. And there was a recent win on these smaller nuclear reactors that there's now a new permitting path, and it's going to take a couple of years. Blah 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 blah. And that'll get
NRC
fixed. The
NRC makes sure that people don't enrich uranium, that they don't turn it into weapons. Like it's more than just energy. It's more than just like, right? Like it's like
so I'm
an
thinking
international.
particularly about
percent.
the I believe it's called the Path 62. Check me on that. For smaller nuclear reactors and getting licensing for those. There's a potentially expedited pathway that'll eventually run through. Of course, if you're a true baller, you can just tell them, you can just ignore them. Have them send feds your way. Other issue that I think is going to be the more pressing one is local opposition. Um, the reason I'm on a fake name is that the true strat to really getting a nuclear plant permitted is to have a line item for Pinkertons in your permitting budget. Just
What is a Pinkerton?
these are the strike breakers from the Union days.
Okay.
Just liquidate the opposition a little bit. This is why I'm under a fake name.
Okay.
And that
Is
becomes
there is there kind of like a? I just wanted to highlight. I do think the world net, that like on net, like even normal people like us, there is a pull for and an allowance for nuclear, and it's coming through heavy industry just verticalizing to nuclear. In other words, they're saying, you know what, we're just going to make our own nuclear reactor, and maybe that's like, maybe that's the forever shortcut around this. Because, yeah, I mean, I don't see how you get, like, we're still concerned about weapons being created, right? Like, we're still concerned about that.
I'll use the data center controversy as a point of reference, where again, verticalize the infrastructure. You do what you want on your property. Your neighbors will still try to stop you, especially if the neighbors think you're getting rich off their suffering, even if their suffering is self-inflicted, even if it's for some other reason. Doesn't really matter, because NIMBYism is tyranny of your neighbors, functionally.
Yeah.
And that is not a problem you can really solve by localism, because you're looking at, I mean, we are the region of town meetings. And so, if the problem for nuclear is it's not going to fly in town meeting, then that's a harder problem.
One of the issues with
Jobs.
town meetings is that the people who have time to go to those are the people who have nothing better to do.
Yeah.
And so then it's just government by the like, I don't know, um, most
Unemployed.
of unemployed,
Retired.
Most retired.
or,
Yeah.
yeah.
And you can talk about, yeah, it's going to make a lot of jobs, but the data center people are saying the same thing too, and people don't buy that. You can think about, bringing new factory jobs in, but where are the factory people going to come in? You're going to have to build the housing for the new factory workers, and oh my god, it's going to increase traffic. And so ultimately, it's going to be a matter of, you have to like get people to trust that heavy industry and new construction is good for them, and it's hard. You have to convince people. You have to convince people that you're trustworthy. And alternately, you have to put the second element to work.
Yeah, I guess that's it sounds threatening, but I hear what you're saying. It's like there's a whole like I forget what book it is, but there's a whole thesis around like the lack of the frontier. Like before, if you were like unhappy with your lot,
Mm-hmm.
you just went west, right? There was like always more. There was more frontier to be explored. You can go like make your own life, but now like all of Earth is uh, populated, and there's no more frontier, and so. I don't know. Maybe when space opens up for humans, it'll solve some of our like people will have a place to go building it.
Yeah, it's not an easy problem, and if I did have the solution, I would have a lot more money than I do.
What should we do? I mean, you were kind of dancing around it. Like go to town meetings.
I mean, if you want to really get working, and this is that gives my call to action as I close out. If you really want to get involved in electric service in your area, um, show up to PUC meetings, show up to permitting meetings, say yes, I do want new stuff. And if you really want to cause some havoc, show up to Iceland, New England, like meetings, take notes. Um, because Iceland, New England have very few people who are not insiders on their case. Um, and right now, the only people who were really holding Iceland, New England to account, who were citizens, were me and then some like Vermont environmentalist wackadoos. Um,
Fascinating. So they're like
So
paid protesters or something
they're
that
not
are
paid
like
protesters. They're just not very bright. I talked to them. I wish they were better at this.
so show up to town meetings. Show up to like. Is there a place where people can like? Is there a? Is it easy to find these things or just
They're
ChatGPT it?
the actual stuff is like annoying to find, but that's what Claude Code is for. That
Yeah.
shit, the AI will find you the links.
yeah,
I
maybe
won't.
we
I
we
won't
need to
say
deploy agents. Sorry, go ahead, Ryan.
no. No. I won't say who it was, but I was helping some. I was helping with some legislation recently, and one of the people that was voting on it was very clearly has like a look. Everybody has an interest. That's how you have skin in the game of life, and I don't have a problem with that. Um, but to have so much influence to stop this bill from even like getting discussed, I was just like, that's insane. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, I guess I I wanted to suggest that I think like maybe joining an interest group,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and maybe this is like a I don't know call to action for you. Maybe you should create an interest group uh, based New Englanders who want to be wealthier, which is everybody.
You think so?
Um,
But
I just
definitely,
think
yeah,
I just think you're well positioned for it.
yeah. I am time crunched, but I'm happy to help out. And this is the open for the anyone listening. Um, if you want to get hip on what's happening on energy, ask Ryan or Pardha for contact for me, and like I'll buy you a beer and I'll give you the skinny. Like more people need to know in detail and like do something about it because it can't just be me.
Awesome. I'll close on that. Thanks for coming and hanging out with us, chatting about energy and regulation.
All right.
And we'll see
Thank
you
you very
around.
much.
Ichiro.
Take care.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye bye.
All right. Thank you so much.